Welcome inside the voice of college football, Arkansas. I'm your host, Austin Robbie. We've got a great show for you today. The NFL season ended yesterday. The Super Bowl was played. Not a thrilling game, but the Seattle Seahawks are the 2026 Super Bowl champions. And that means the offseason is headed this direction. And one of the biggest events in the offseason is the NFL draft. So the 2026 NFL draft is going to be at the end of April, and I wanted to talk about it specifically in its context to the guys that played for us this past season. Despite our 2-10 season, we've got a lot of guys that could be potential draft picks. And one of the main reasons doing this show this week is a lot of the all-star circuits. So the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, a lot of those big time games have ended in the last couple weeks. And so I want to talk about how a lot of those guys from our team did in those events. A lot of it's about the practices. There is a game at the end of all these events, but the practices are really where you have the opportunity to shine, to develop, and to show your value as a draft prospect. And a lot of the guys from this 2025 Razorback team did just that. So just a bit of a recap if you're not familiar with some of the pre-draft process and what kind of Senior Bowl events there are. A lot of them have actually opened up to some underclassmen, but there's a lot of different all-star circuit games and different events. So one of the early ones is the Hula Bowl. We had three guys go to it. It was played on January 10th, so about a month ago from now. And it was Corey Robinson the second, the offensive tackle, who primarily played left tackle for us. Kenai Walker, who was one of our outside corners, and then Larry Worth the third, the safety. And then another bowl, there was the American Bowl, was played on January 22nd. We had a guy just one in it, and it was wide receiver Omega Blake. The Shrine Bowl was on January 27th, so about 2 weeks ago. We actually didn't have anybody for that event, but for the Senior Bowl, which is considered still the premier all-star circuit game, we had six dudes. So that included quarterback Taylor Green, running back Mike Washington Jr., Fernando Carmona on the offensive line, Cam Ball, defensive lineman, linebacker Xavier Sori Jr., and then the defensive back room, corner Julian Neal. So a lot of different guys at all the different levels. So you got the quarterback, a skill player, an offensive lineman, a D lineman, the second level linebacker, and then a defensive back. So a lot of different players represented in that Senior Bowl, which, like I said, is considered the premier all-star game of the offseason. So I want to start off just real quick before we get into it, just giving a plug for the show, and it's going to vocfb.com/shop. It's VOCFB, Voice of College Football.com/shop. You can check out, we got merchandise. If you go to the team drop down, Arkansas is one of those first teams on there. You can check it out. We got a lot of different merchandise items. So if you're looking for a way to support the show, just go over to vocfb.com/shop. So we're going to get into the show today. What we're going to do, I'm going to kind of give the breakdown of where our guys were represented in these all-star circuit games, but we're going to go just group by group. So we're going to start off with the offensive side of the ball, and that's going to include just your quarterback position, the skill players, the line, and then we'll switch over to the defensive side on the second half of the show. But we're going to talk about guys that I anticipate to be draft prospects for this upcoming 2026 NFL draft. So that's going to include names that I just mentioned that played in some of those all-star games, but that's going to mention some guys that are further down that list, guys that probably won't be drafted, but maybe potential camp invites, and guys that will really fight and try to make the squad. If we look back last year, we had a couple different guys drafted. Isaac Tesla being kind of the main guy. Him and Landon Jackson were early round picks, but there were also guys that made camps and really tried to fight to be on rosters, including Andrew Armstrong, got a lot of different defensive backs, Hudson Clark, Danico Slaughter. There were a lot of different players that really fought and tried to make those training camps and ultimately the 53-man roster. So we're going to start with the quarterback position, probably the biggest name of Arkansas prospects. And that's quarterback Taylor Green. This is a guy that has a lot of traits, and that's going to be his big calling card as he goes into this draft process. And that's because of his size. I mean, it's at 6'6", and I'm going to try to get the exact measurables because I think it's important. And a lot of these events, they're going to measure these guys. Uh, and they will at the combine as well. And we'll talk more about that throughout the show, the combine and pro days, and how impactful that is for you as a draft prospect. But Taylor Green came in at 6'6", 229 pounds. So a lot of guys, Diego Pavia in the past, Kyler Murray, these guys, these shorter quarterbacks, or just even run of the mill size quarterbacks, the numbers they put on these teams' websites just aren't, necessarily that accurate. They'll be listed at 6 foot and they're 5'10", or they're listed at 6'4" and they're 6'2". That's not the case with Taylor Green. I mean, he's every bit of 6'6", 230 pounds, and he's a guy that's all traits. And we saw that, and we can believe that as Arkansas fans this past season because that's what he's been for us. He's a guy that has good throwing motion, great speed, but he lacks awareness in the pocket. He lacks consistency on downfield throws. He could be aloof on what it looks like to stand in the pocket and really read defenses, and makes poor decisions at times when he's frazzled. So he's a guy that he's got a lot of traits, and where that ultimately will end up for him as a player, I don't know what team may draft him. I think of different spots where I think he could be impactful. A guy that I think comes to my mind, not necessarily as a player comp, but similar play style. This guy's a lot better of a player than Taylor Green, but it's Trevor Lawrence. I think they have similar builds. And so maybe in Jacksonville, you look at him as a potential second or third string guy, a developmental player just to have as a potential backup behind Trevor Lawrence. But I think somewhere where the dual threat ability is something that coach implements, and a spot where you're just trying to really develop your third quarterback on the depth chart. Taylor Green I think he's a potential backup level player. I don't think he's a starter in the NFL. I think he could start for you, but he's never going to be a long term starter. So I think he's a guy that coaching staffs and offensive coordinators are going to be looking at as hey, can we put this guy behind our current starter, develop him, and have him be our backup quarterback in the long term future? So Taylor Green, to me right now, what I'm looking at and kind of scouring the market of different draft analysts is I think he's going to be a day 3 prospect. I've seen some day 2 stuff. And just for reference, day 1 is only round 1. Day 2 is rounds 2 and 3. And then day 3 is rounds 4 through 7. So I think he's going to be a 4 through 7 guy, particularly probably 4 through 6. He's really taken advantage of a weak class. So I think he's a guy that could be one of the first probably 10 quarterbacks taken, even maybe closer to 5 even. So uh, Trinidad Chambliss, I believe, is going to be in this class after not getting his waiver to play for this upcoming season for Ole Miss. So he's going to be one of those early guys. It's going to be Mendoza, and then him and Ty Simpson. And then Taylor Green's legitimately in that conversation of next guys. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier, I know, is one of those guys. Sawyer Robertson, Luke Altmaier. There's different names in that list. And Taylor Green, I think, can be even one of them. So rounds 4 through 6, Jaguars is a team that just comes out to my head immediately, but I'm sure there's other teams that would be interested in Taylor Green. So that's the first quarterback or first player at the quarterback position. And then our second player is another guy who's going to be, I think, an even earlier pick than Taylor Green, and that's running back Mike Washington Jr. I think he's a potential day 2 pick. I've seen some stuff as high as second round. I would be shocked if that's what happens. But rounds 3 and 4, I think, are real legitimate for him. And a guy who's listed by the Senior Bowl at 6 foot, 228 pounds. He's a larger back. Uh, and I think that's really one of his biggest advantages. He's got great speed for a guy of his size. He runs downhill. He runs very physical. He finds ways to get to that next level. He was a guy that had a really high yards per carry average for us this past season. In fact, at times, I'm sure as a fan, you were wondering why he wasn't getting the ball more. But Mike Washington Jr. is a guy whose stock, I think, has just continued to rise since the season ended. I think he had a quiet season just from a outsider's perspective and a national media perspective. But he's a guy. There's the Notre Dame running backs in this class, and that's Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. But Mike Washington Jr. is legitimately in that conversation post those two guys. So I think look for him as a big time riser, and he's going to be in some of those maybe day 1 and 2 mock drafts as a potential third round pick. So we're going to move to the pass catchers where we have a weaker class amongst the Razorback community here. Omega Blake, I mentioned, was at the American Bowl. Raylan Sharp and Rohan Jones are guys that their eligibility is done, so they're technically in this draft class. But if you were to look at a lot of prospect ranking and stuff. These are two guys you're not going to see on those lists, and in fact, you're probably not going to see Omega Blake either. But these three guys make up the 2026 draft prospects for the Razorbacks at the pass catching positions. Best case for these guys is they're undrafted free agents, and they have a meaningful training camp and an opportunity to try to make a 53-man roster. I mean, Omega Blake was a guy that looked good for us this past season as our wide receiver one. And then Rohan Jones is a guy who I think was a pretty talented player, was a big-time pass catcher in some big-time moments. Found a opportunity to catch probably 25 yards per catch on the season. Like he was a guy that when he caught it, it was a meaningful play for us. And maybe he has the opportunity to be maybe like that H-back hybrid in the NFL. So these are three guys. Don't expect them to be drafted, but these are guys that could be potential camp invites. So once the draft's over and a lot of you undrafted guys start signing as free agents, these guys could be on that list. And then the last position on the offensive side of the football, the offensive line, these two guys I mentioned were in the All-Star circuit. Fernando Carmona went to the Senior Bowl. Corey Robinson II went to the Hula Bowl. The measurements on these guys, Corey Robinson II came in at about 6'5", 300. Carmona a little bit shorter at 6'4", but around 320 pounds, 318 to be specific. So Carmona is a guy that I think will be around the day 3 range. I think probably closer to the end of the draft. I'm looking at rounds 5 through 7 for him, but I do think he'll be drafted. I think going into the season there was a little more hype for him than this. I think he was a potential day 2 pick. But after this season, it wasn't that he was bad, but I just don't think he provided a lot of just he didn't do much better, I think, than originally anticipated. And I think in some of that projection was him to maybe take a next step. And I don't think that necessarily happened. He had a great season, and he's a guy that's going to be drafted at the guard position, a guy who played left tackle for us last year, but kicked inside and played left guard for us this year. And I think that's where he's going to be drafted and expected to be playing. Corey Robinson II could also be there as well, not necessarily because he maybe lacks the physical tools to be an offensive tackle, but just because he lacks the skill set. And as a left tackle for us, he was solid, but he's not a guy I think that could play that position at the NFL level. So he's a guy that could also kick inside to guard. But Carmona, like I mentioned, I think he can be drafted. I think he will be drafted. Corey Robinson II, I don't anticipate that. I see him as a training camp invite guy only. So we're about to switch over to the defensive side of the football, but we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select a betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
All right, we are back. So we just talked about the offensive side of the football. Let's head over to the defensive side of the ball, where we weren't great this season, but I think we're going to have some guys as potential draft picks. So we're going to start on the defensive line. And the only guy we really have of note is Cam Ball. So he's a guy I think could be a potential draft pick. I don't think he's as solidified as some of the other guys that we just talked about. But he is a guy that also went to the Senior Bowl, had a pretty solid week. But he's a guy that a bit of an older prospect, obviously was a Razorback for a long period of time now. Comes in at 6'4", 313 according to the Senior Bowl. Had to do a lot over the last couple of years for the Razorbacks, and something he won't be called upon as an NFL player. He's going to have a little more of a niche role getting drafted, just because he's had to play a lot of different positions for us and really be the only impact interior defensive lineman on this team for the last couple of years. And a lot's been asked of him. And so he's a guy, I think round 6 is where you start to hear his name. Not necessarily the greatest prospect from a athleticism standpoint, so I think that's gonna drop him into that day 3 and into the back half of that, in round 6, potentially a 7th round pick or even an undrafted free agent. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't get drafted, but he's gonna be a high priority free agent if not. So, Cameron Ball, I gotta look for a potential draft pick, but probably cooled off and a little bit towards the back half of the draft. All right, the linebacker position, Steven Dix Jr., Xavier Sorey Jr. Sorey got an invite to the Senior Bowl, had a decent week, but this is the guy that I don't anticipate being a drafted player. He was a big time name coming in this season just because of how well he played last year. And Steven Dix Jr. as well. Like this was the linebacking duo that we had. And they just, man, I just wasn't impressed with what they put on tape this season. These are guys that I think didn't really have that athleticism box checked. I thought their instincts were not up to standards for a linebacker in the NFL, and I think that hurt their stock going in to this draft process. So Story's a guy. Maybe he works himself in to a 7th round pick or a late round pick, but I don't see that happening. And then Steven Dix Jr. to me is a camp invite at best. But these are two linebackers. Expectations were high, I think, going into the season. I think Story, for all accounts, I think would have been a draftable player according to most people going into the season. Definitely was like an SEC all conference type player. But this year was just not. I think he didn't want this year. Like right, this was not. I think he would agree in saying this was not the best season he could have put on tape. But he, I think, is a leader in the locker room, and we'll see if his intangibles, the things that are not the athleticism stuff, right? He came in at 6'2", 220, so he's not like that's not an undersized linebacker anymore. That's your almost your typical linebacker now. So if he can run well, we'll see if he runs and makes it to the combine. We're going to talk about the guys I think that maybe will make the combine here in a second. But Sorey's a guy. I think he's an undrafted free agent, and Steven Dix is a camp invite at best. So the last position on the defensive side of the football, there's a couple names here. So on the defensive back room, I've got Julian Neal, Kenai Walker, Jordan Young, and then at safety, Larry Worth III. So Neal, Walker, and Young at the cornerback position. Neal was at the Senior Bowl. Kenai Walker was at the Hula Bowl, along with Larry Worth III, and then Jordan Young, I don't believe, received an All-Star game invite. But these are guys that have potential draft pick implications here. So Julian Neal could be our highest pick. It's really between him and Washington Jr. right now for me. But Julian Neal, I think his ceiling is round 3. I think he could be round 4 at worst, maybe round 5. But he could be a day 2 pick going in round 3. He's a guy that him and Walker, I don't think is going to be a draftable guy. I think he's a UDFA. But these are two guys that I think impressed a lot of people this past season for the Razorbacks, where a defense that was really struggling, and a lot of that came from being unable to get after the passer, not playing well in the middle of the field. But on the outside, man, Neal and Walker really tried their best. I think they had productive seasons, high pass breakup numbers. Like these were guys that I think if the players around them played up to par, would have gotten a lot more credence. Would have had better seasons, I think, for some people. But I know Neal's a guy that a lot of people are high on. I didn't expect that, not because I thought he had a poor season for the Razorbacks, but I just didn't understand the hype. I didn't think his hype was going to be as big as it's been. So Julian Neal, who came in at 6'1", 202, maybe it's just the size aspect, like he's a bigger corner, and some of those guys are coveted at the next level. But we'll see what he runs. Athleticism is really big for these type of position players. So if Neal could test well, I think he can continue to improve his stock. Kenai Walker is a guy who played at the Hula Bowl, had a pretty solid game. Larry Worth III, another guy who played at the Hula Bowl, had 2 pass breakups in the actual game that week. But those two guys, I think they're UDFAs. I don't think they're going to get drafted. Maybe their stock can climb from a pro day or something. But these two guys don't strike me as potential draft picks. Walker came in at 6'2", 203, another larger corner. And then Larry Worth III at 6'4", 223, a guy who was listed, I think, at the linebacker position for us 2 years ago, was listed at safety this past year, played that primarily. I don't know what he's going to be at the next level. I mean, we talked about Sorey, who's 6'2", 220, Worth's even bigger than that. So does he move to the linebacker position? This is a more common thing at the NFL now. It's like some of these big hybrid safeties playing at the linebacker position. So maybe that helps Worth. I don't know. But Jordan Young, the last guy who played a lot of nickel for us, he's a UDFA guy, training camp guy. At best, I don't see him having any stock. And the last guy, just to give the special team some love, I've seen him on some prospect rankings at the punter position. That's Devin Bale, who saw the field a lot this season for the Razorbacks. But he's a guy, he's not getting drafted. He may come in to compete with another punter who's maybe had a poor season this past year and give a guy a run for his money. But I anticipate that at best. But just wanted to give Devin Bale a shout out here as a potential 2026 NFL draft prospect. So those are the guys I've got, offensive, defensive side of the ball, and then Devin Bale there. But the NFL Combine invites are probably coming out this week. I think the Combine's towards the end of this month in February. And so this is just my prediction on who I think we will have at the 2026 NFL Combine. I would say your Senior Bowl guys, like to get invited to the Senior Bowl, I think you've got a real shot to make the 2026 NFL Combine. I think anybody outside that is at risk. I would start with a guy like Larry Worth III. I don't think he's making the Combine. Kenai Walker, maybe. Some of these guys that are fringe dudes, you really have to have like a calling card or some sort of maybe freak athleticism or freak measurables that kind of gets you there, that gets teams intrigued to want you to be there. I don't think any of our guys that are on the fringe are that. Corey Robinson II, I don't think he's making it. If anybody of the non-Senior Bowl guys are making it, it's probably either Omega Blake or Kenai Walker. I just don't see any of these guys making it. Maybe they do though. Taylor Green's going to be there. Mike Washington Jr. is going to be there. Fernando Camargo is going to be there. Cam Ball is going to be there, and Julian Neal. Like I would set in stone those five guys. I'd be utterly shocked if one of those five guys are not there. That's mainly because those are the five dudes I have right now with draftable grades and doing that research. So I would be shocked if one of those five aren't. Xavier Story Jr. is kind of the possible guy. So if we're ranking this in like, all right, those five guys are solidified. Doubtful is your Kenai Walker, Omega Blake. I wouldn't be utterly shocked if they're there, but I don't anticipate it. Larry Worth III, Corey Robinson II, like I just don't think it's happening. But Xavier Story Jr. is that like possible, probable guy. Like he made the Senior Bowl, but he also didn't have a great season. He's a linebacker. How much do they like? How many guys do you have at that position there? I don't know. But what I do know is that the pro day for Arkansas is probably going to be in March, so the following month. And all these guys are probably going to be doing something there. Maybe a Taylor Green or a Mike Washington or a Julian Neal just kill the combine. And they just, crazy booster stock. I mean, like if Mike Washington's running in the 4.4s, and especially like the low 4.4s, like maybe that's a big deal for him, just given his size. If he does well in the pass catching drills, giving him that versatility to be a playmaker at the next level, maybe that helps him, and they don't ultimately do anything at the pro day. But these guys are nobody here is a first round pick and even potentially a second round pick. So I think they're all at a disadvantage here, and they're going to need all the leverage they can get to continue to build this draft stock by participating in any of it they can. So I think five make the combine. If I had to pick all those Senior Bowl guys except Sorey, but we will see. And those invites should come out this week, so that could be something we talk about on next Monday's show. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. The NFL draft is coming up. As a guy who's interested in it, I wanted to kind of give it its credence on this channel and relate it to these Razorbacks that played for us this past year. So a disappointing season for sure last year as a 2-10 team, but really not going to have, I think, a draft class that really reflects that. So if we have all those five guys actually drafted, to have five players drafted on a 2-10 team, it really does say a lot about coaching. It says a lot about execution, and that's where if we can have even as talented of a roster as we did this next season, I think there are promising things to come. So please like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications to Arkansas, the voice of college football, to get all the content that we are doing this off season. It's going to be a slow off season, so we're going to try to fill it with a lot of different things. So feel free to comment down below what you want to see. If you want to see more stuff like this, we're going to try to keep it obviously related to the Razorbacks in some capacity, but we can do a lot of different things over this off season because there's a lot of time to do it. So the transfer portal's closed. It's not opening up again until the spring. We've got a lot of dead time. So a lot of different topics could be coming down the pipeline. Y'all just let me know what you want to hear going forward. So we've got live shows each and every week on Monday. Sometimes they're at 4:30, sometimes they're at 5:30, or somewhere in between. So just turn on those notifications so you know when we are going live. It'll be up sometime in the either early morning or afternoon, well before the show starts. So keep those notifications turned on so you can stay tuned. So like always here at the Voice of College Football Arkansas, God bless and go Hogs.